My conversation with Pat Kelly, who has been sharing her story about volunteering in Africa for the last 4 years. Pat, where are we going today?
I went to Tanzania through Workaway, which is the online form that I use to find different opportunities. You can subscribe and you can find opportunities all over the world. And so I found the Bright English Medium School. English is put in there because it's the language that they teach in. And it was in a small little village that's outside of the Ngorongoro Crater area, which is a huge game reserve that people from all over the world go to, and not far from the Serengeti, which is more famous. And so it was this little village, and it was a couple from Arusha, which is 6 hours away. It's the place you fly into to go climb or to see Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's what it's famous for. So they came from there and they decided that there was a need for education. And this is a heavily populated Maasai area. So it was quite fascinating because as you walk down the road or drive down the road, there are Maasai that are herding sheep, goats, the men and the women that are walking all over the place, and they're in their full Maasai garb. And so it's another National Geographic experience from the time you get there. So they have a school that's about 250 kids, and it's a mixture. Some it's boarding because they come from so far, so they need to stay there. And then there's day students that go there, and they use the regular curriculum for Tanzania, which is by law they have to, but they also provide free room and board for many because the Maasai culture, specifically for girls, is that they don't need to be educated. So what some of the fathers will say in the area, which they've worked a long time to get the trust, is if you want my daughter to go to school, then you have to support her. They have dorms there for boys and girls. And they provide, like I said, an education for many. Some will pay, people can afford. And they've got teachers from all cities that are nearby. So they're accredited teachers. And it's not an easy curriculum because we had a group of us, ended up being about 6 of us. The others were from Germany, and then one was from Portugal. And we had a doctor, a mechanical engineer. Everybody was educated, and we had a hard time. We were like, wow, this is hard. But we were there to help teach, but also to do anything we could to help the organization. And so some was fundraising. They wanted us to do GoFundMe pages. It was different. The Tanzania operates differently than the other places I'd been to. I found that there were many places there that had learned that volunteers could ask people for money back home. And that was a part that they integrated into the request for volunteers. But we also helped them with computers. We painted classrooms, anything that was needed.
How did you get out there? You said it was quite a way away.
So they had arranged for us to use a local transport, like a taxi, and it ended up, they coordinated it, but we had to pay for it. This is a nonprofit, and nothing's cheap in Tanzania when it has to do with tourism. And since we were being transported out to the area where Serengeti and the Ngorongoro Crater was, it's not that cheap, but we were all able to use one vehicle. And we decided, since we were going through tourism areas, that we would end up just pay the extra money and we would go see the Ngorongoro Crater and spend the night on the way out there, because it is a 6 to 10 hour drive, depending on the roads, because the rains were very bad when we got there. We all got along great and lived in one house for a month together. And we came from various backgrounds. It was a great experience for us to all be together.
How did you decide what subjects you're teaching?
They were very organized. We signed it. So they had accredited teachers, and we went and aided. So mechanical engineer guy went and helped with math because that was his forte, but they have really good teachers. We're in the case of South Africa, you felt you were really supplementing in a way that they needed because they weren't getting in these village schools as strong of education. The Tanzanian curriculum was, like I said, very strict. And so these kids were getting a good education. But in the English class, of course, it was a good thing for them to have as a support, was for our first language being English and coming different accent, of course, in my case. And so I helped with the English classes. But we did find out that the teaching was so good that we thought we need to find other things to do. So within the month, we painted six classrooms. One of our volunteers from Germany got it supported. She contacted friends back in Germany and said, would you help? They all said yes. And they sent her the money and she bought all the paint for us to paint these six classrooms. So we literally not only got the paint, but we did the work. Also built a collector for rainwater because their wells were not always good enough to support all these kids. So there's, of course, when we were there, so much rain. So we built a collector of the rainwater, which was made out of plastic soda bottles that we filled with sand. They're called eco bricks that we learned of, and filled them with sand. And then you put cement around them, and they created collections for rainwater so that they could use those. And for when there wasn't enough pressure with their wells.
How old were the kids in the school?
It was pre-kindergarten to, I believe the oldest were eighth graders is when I believe they graduated. And they would go on to a secondary school. It was a real mixture. Each classroom was broken down. They had the little kids and they were taught English, alphabet. And they were adorable. So I also taught in that as often as I could because they were so cute. Singing, but the alphabet, numbers, days of the week, they're little 4-year-old, and some of them were living there. They couldn't get transported enough. And so they would live there for sometimes Monday through Friday, and they'd be picked up where they would be there for a month at a time and their parents would come get them.
And so how did they choose what children?
Some because they were in the community and their parents could afford and they would pay for them to go. So they were day and they would school bus and would pick them up and drop them off. It was the only school. Well, there was a smaller one further away, but they really found a need in this community that there was no school. So they set up the main school in the community. And so if they're supposed to go by law, but if you can't get there, they don't go and nobody's going to force it. The Maasai, they don't even mess with them. If they come down from Kenya and they live there, this borders Kenya. So the Maasai are between Kenya and Tanzania. They have their own culture. And so the boys are sheep herders and goat herders. And as long as they can, and then the girls stay at home and help their mothers. So this is a way to help them because they need education. All kids should be given that. And then they should have the choice afterward if they're going to go in the family business. But many don't get education. So this is a way to help them.
And do you know how much it would cost a family to send their child?
They did a sliding scale. If they couldn't afford it, they literally had a little house on their property where we lived, which was a 10-minute drive or a 30-minute walk, as many times we had to walk because, again, the rains had gotten the car stuck out by their house. But they had a little house there that for the kids that couldn't afford, and they had an overflow with the school. They were letting these little ones sleep in a house. They had a caretaker there, and they would get them to the school every day. So it's the kindness of their heart. But I would say probably for the people that could afford it, it would have been $200 or $250 for the year, if you would say US dollars. But many, they gave it free. So that's why they needed the fundraising, was to help, continue to help. They fed them and they stayed there and provided clothes for many of them because if their parents couldn't afford it, they would provide clothes.
Uniforms?
It was all of the schools in Africa, you wear a uniform. They had brought her from a village, I don't know how many hours away by bus. They'd learned of her, and she was making school uniforms for the kids while we were there. The pants, the skirt, she could make anything. It was amazing. We had her make clothes for us. We bought material, and you say, she doesn't speak English. I want it like this, or I want it to match this. And we went to school for the day. We came back and the clothes were made. So she was there to make school uniforms, and they had raised the money to get the material to make the uniforms for the kids.
What was the house like you were staying in?
In the main house was 4 bedrooms, and they were big bedrooms. They had an outside kitchen. It was in another little building that was a shacky thing that they cooked on charcoal or firewood. And they had a kitchen person that did that. So we didn't cook. We could learn to see what they were doing. They made really good food. We paid them $5 a day for our food. I seem to see a lot more in Uganda, Tanzania. So they'll say, if you want to eat local, we will provide it for you. But if you want meat, and in this case, chicken was extremely expensive. They would get beef, they would have goat, but we paid $5 a piece so that we could have really good food, and it contributed to the household as well. And so you had to agree before you went that you would do that. And so we had great meals. They cooked them all out in this outside little place, and there would be beans, pasta, vegetables, goat, chicken. Not, chicken was like once. It's unusual. It's more expensive there than beef is. Because again, the Maasai are all herding goats and cows. And so there will be more of that. And so there would be a variety of things to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and nothing fancy. But so there were 4 bedrooms. The one couple was in one, the Portuguese was in the other, and then the German lady and I shared it with a big room. So there was a single bed and a double bed. And so we shared that. And then we all shared one bathroom, and it was a bucket shower in this bathroom. So they would have one of their staff filled a huge barrel of hot water, or well, cold water, and then smaller buckets of hot water were brought in. So it was an indoor bathroom, but you had a scooper to do a bucket shower. So you would dip it, mix the hot with cold, and dip it and pour it on yourself, lather up, and then dip it and bucket on. Yeah. And it was cold when we were there. It was, you wanted the hot water. So it was quite chilly in the house. So we shared a lounge area. And then the family, they and their 2 children all shared one room. And so we all shared this one bathroom. And it was amazing how we all did okay with that. And they had an indoor toilet. And so that was nice. And then the bucket shower was all in this one bathroom. But all of us had to share. 11 people were sharing one bathroom.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And then the outside, there was another house for kids. And so it was quite active all the time. And then you always have a Maasai lady coming through selling fruit or something. And so it's just an interesting place to be. But we all did well, got along well, and it worked okay.
And did you work 7 days a week then?
No, it was 5 days a week. And Sundays, they're big church goers. They would arrange we could go to church or not. Saturdays, there's a big Maasai market there. So we would go, although again, it would have been a different experience, except it was so much rain. They were having these floods and cars were getting stuck in the mud all the time. And so we had a different experience. But one of the weekends we were there, we went over to Serengeti. They arranged for us. We paid for it, but all of us went together and did the safari in the Serengeti for 2 days, which was probably, I think, to get there, it took us 4 hours. And so we left at like 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning and came back on Sunday night. And so we stayed in our safari lodge that night and did 2 days of game driving. We did an hour-and-a-half walk up this mountain to meet a couple of Maasai families that they actually educated their daughters. And so we got to go and sit in a Maasai house with these ladies who had built their houses out of mud and had the fire in the middle, and they translated for us everything about their lives. And it was quite fascinating.
Tell us.
The system is that the men are nomadic, and they take their goats or cows, and they have multiple wives. So they will go to one wife, and the women build their houses. And they build the fire, and they built these houses so they were nearby each other. So they all rely on each other. There were children and these women. And they told us the stories that they weren't happy that their husbands had wives in other areas, but there was nothing they could do. It was accepted. But they didn't get help. They went and did their own firewood. The men would, sometimes bring meat by, but they would have to garden. The men would come, they would sleep with the men, they would get pregnant, and the men would go on to the next nomadic home that they were with, or they live out range many times, but they would go to another wife's home or another woman's home and be there. And this wife would be they would have 5 kids or whatever that they were there. And the boys would eventually follow in their father's footsteps. And the girls there was one we met, she was going to be getting married at 13. And she would start the cycle all over again. These Maasai are very true to their culture. So this is new for them. This couple have just talked to them saying, please let us educate your daughters at least up till 8th grade or whatever, at least that this can help them in the future. They have to get the approval of the father who says, then you support them. The mothers, wanted that for them. You could see that they were very pro, but I'm sure, we were getting a glimpse, but there would be others that needed the help and would say, no, you can't take them. We had a good time talking to them and learning about their life. This couple tried to make it where you can go to every Saturday. There was this big Maasai market where you could buy Maasai materials, sandals, but that they were all trading their vegetables it was their market. They brought all of their wares down and everybody could come and shop like a flea market, we would say. But it was all the different booths and they were selling tobacco, onions in one place, sandals in another that they'd made out of tires. That's their standard. They take the tread from tires and they would make sandals from them. And material, which they're famous for, is this Maasai material that they wear around them as they walk in. It's deep reds with black. And so that's what they wear.
So in their residences, there's no electricity, there's not plumbing.
Now, where we were, they had a solar panel. They were just, when we were there, bringing more power out to these villages. So not the Messiah Hill, but where we were, they had tied in and they were going to be having regular power for when it works. Again, it's Africa. Many times, even in the big cities of South Africa, it doesn't work at times, or they run out of coal and different stories. But they were operating off of solar panels. And so we could all charge our phones. There was a little monitor there that you could watch a movie, which we watched, I think, one the whole time we were there. But we had lights up until 10 o'clock, then all the lights were turned off and it was one in each room. But it was also very rainy the whole time we were there. So we were having a hard time having the solar work, which is a problem. If it's cloudy, it doesn't work so well. So we would all have to charge our stuff as quickly as we could before it ran out. But they were getting power out into this because they were homes. These were regular looking homes down by where we were in this community. And like I said, we went to churches on Sunday and there were in this teeny little place, I think 2 Catholic churches, a Pentecostal and whatever. So Sunday morning was the church, we'll go. And not everybody, but I went and they sang and it was great. And they would introduce us and we would stand up front to be the foreigners that came. And so it was just a good way to see a different culture.
Mm-hmm. What did you do in the evenings?
We would chitty chat, we would read, mostly just socialize. Everybody would be reading their books eventually, but we would have a dinner together. We would all be together and we would just talk and with the people that lived there and then with each other. One night they had a movie that somebody had downloaded on Netflix that we could put on. It was, I say, a monitor. It ended up being, I think it was just their computer screen. And there were 11 of us sitting around this one computer screen to watch a movie. But yeah, we mostly socialize and then just read.
So no Wi-Fi.
No Wi-Fi. We bought data, each of us, which is very common in Africa. When they picked us up, the driver took us and got SIM cards so that we could pay for data. And actually, we could buy more in the little town that we could walk to. The stores would sell it. So we would buy our own data and so that we could have Wi-Fi as long as we had power in our phone or laptop.
So tell me about the couple that ran it.
They met at university in Arusha, and they were both Christians. It wasn't a religious school, but that was definitely in their belief system. And in fact, his brother, I forgot that there was more of us. He was a pastor in another community, and he was there. It is so familial there. Everything is family, and so they had their kids, and his son came with him. So we had even more people at dinner every night. He was staying in an outside building. He was the minister. And so they were very Christians, and it was a part of what they did that they felt that this was God directed for them to be doing this good work. And they were both university degreed, and they felt this need. So I believe she started out as a teacher, and when they were trying to figure out what the need would be, she had grown up in this little village. So they decided that this is what they would do. So they went out there and started, I think probably it had been 10 years before we got there, and started getting the funds and starting this dream of theirs to start this school. So they made it happen.
Is the school year round?
They stayed to the same schedule that Tanzanian government schools do. There would be breaks. So you would have had a Christmas break, and summer there would have been some time. But yes, there would be breaks, and they would go home if they had a home to go to. If not, they would stay in the dormitory. The school would provide for people to be there to stay with the kids. There would be a cook. And again, we would go back to real basic food for the kids, which is what Africa subsists on. I think it was called ugali. It's like a firmer grits that they use, and they make it firm, and then they use it and they scoop into whatever the gravy. So the kids would eat porridge in the morning, and then they would have this ugali for lunch and dinner with the chopped up vegetables and liquid or a soup that they would eat. And then there would be meat. I believe they provided meat for the kids once a week. So they would cook for these kids. They would all line up and they ring a bell, and the kids have their own little plastic cup and a bowl. And then they use the bowl and they eat. Everybody for the most part uses their hands, and they use the ugali to scoop up that, or they would drink the soup out of the bowl. But these kids were assigned, and they would wash them afterward, and they kept their bowl in their cup. So yeah, it's a different life than we're used to. For the most part, everybody there comes from a tribe, but the Maasai are just more distinct because of their lifestyle, where the others, many of them, have assimilated more into regular life there. The Maasai continued with the movies. You see them wearing this garb and having their staff, and they're beautiful people. They're a tall and very regal. We would see these men that were herders that you picture the old pictures or movies of Maasai warriors, and they still look that way. Some have gone and gotten jobs in cities, but these were the ones that choose to live in the true nomadic, still sheep herder, goat herder, cow herder lifestyle. And that's where we were. So that's what we saw more. Whereas if you're in the cities, you'll see them in the cities and they've got jobs. And although many still will wear the Maasai garb, but they'll be in the city trying to get jobs, whether it's cleaning or gardening, whatever. But out in these villages, they still live the true way.
Any crime?
I can't imagine. I guess a chicken could have been stolen or something like that. But out there, I think everybody would know everybody. And at least I never heard of anything like that. If you needed to go, even in a small village, we would walk out, I don't know, maybe a quarter of a mile from where the house was. And because their car kept getting stuck because of the mud, we would walk out through the mud to get to the main road, and we would get on, they called boda, their little motorcycles, and we would just hitchhike to get to school. We would give them 5 cents or something in their local currency to get a ride into the school or to town. If we wanted to go into town to buy drinks, or we actually did go out in town. There was a little bar, and one night we did go out and have drinks, and they were, thrilled to have why were we there or whatever, but they were used to the school getting the volunteers. But yeah, it was interesting.
Volunteers go for a 1-month stay?
You had your choice. So the German volunteers that I was there with, they were all leaving earlier, and I was going to go later. And as I was there, I started thinking, they're all going to leave. I'm going to be there. And nobody knows when this rain is going to stop and how I would be getting out when I wanted to get out. And I talked to the family and I said, I want to leave when they do, because they were already arranging the transportation to get them out of this village. And so I decided to leave when the German, especially my roommate, Uli from Germany, she was leaving. She and I actually did a safari on the way back. We went back to Arusha. And in the meantime, I had looked online and found another nonprofit in Arusha. And I went and volunteered for New Beginning, a 22-year-old guy that had just graduated the university. And he and 2 other friends had started this nonprofit to teach adults, women specifically, sewing, English, and he was just starting. I was his first workaway volunteer, and helped him set up for fundraising and trying to get the word out. I also taught English to these ladies that were there to learn sewing so that they could have their own businesses. I was there for 2 weeks, and they provided a little room, and we had to go outside to have a squat toilet and an outside shower. And then he would either cook in his room, or we would go to little local restaurants and have breakfast and lunch or late lunch kind of dinner thing. And so I did that for 2 weeks, and it was another great experience that he and I would walk to where his little office was, which was about a mile away. And we would walk through the town. There was a teacher to teach sewing, but then I would do an English class each day with these ladies, and then also helping him get funding from different sources, reaching out and getting a bank account and things like that. So just helping him. This is 2.5 years later, and he's still doing great with his organization.